Good afternoon, all. Welcome to today's webinar, the first in a series about housing. We are thrilled to have so many of you joining us on this warm spring day. I want to start by recognizing the generosity and dedication of each of you, our donor and advisor family. Your commitment to partnering with our community to build a safer, healthier Pittsburgh is core to creating a region where everyone can thrive. I am deeply grateful for your collaboration on behalf of the Pittsburgh Foundation. Today's discussion is the first of three that we are hosting to dive into the very complex and deeply emotional issue of homelessness and how it has impacted our neighbors and community here in Pittsburgh. Today, we will focus on street homelessness and the outreach and supportive services offered in our community. We'll delve into challenges and potential solutions and ways to support those who are unhoused. The following two webinars will center on transitional housing and then supportive and permanent housing. Your engagement today follows an arc that started with our commitment to prevent eviction and the crisis of homelessness brought on by the pandemic. We now have a long-term focus on the crisis as part of a growing national coalition of housing and homelessness providers, tenants, developers, and policymakers who are innovating new solutions to solve America's toughest housing challenges. These challenges are affecting homeowners and renters across all income levels. Since 2015, the number of unhoused people staying outside of shelters has increased by 48%, and home prices in the United States have jumped an average of 47% just since 2019. The escalation of homelessness has stretched thin the providers and case managers working hard on this issue. As you will hear today and over the course of the series, this broad, complex issue encapsulates so much more than just temporary shelters, which many think are the solution to this crisis. In fact, a lack of resources has constricted movement from street homelessness and shelters to housing that is supportive, transitional, affordable, and most important, permanent. As a community foundation, it is our unique responsibility to work with partners to identify gaps, cross-sector solutions, and convening opportunities, as demonstrated by our gathering today, that can help our region and, most importantly, those experiencing homelessness in any capacity. We are grateful you've joined us in owning a responsibility to our neighbors to address this critical issue, especially if we are to meet our goal of improving quality of life for all residents. Today, you will hear how solutions to meet our community's needs rely on partnerships and support of service providers, health and human service departments, nonprofits, and you, our donors. I am encouraged that we are joined by our partners today, including our expert panelists, Dave Lettrich from the Street Medicine Institute, and Andy Hatfill from the Allegheny County Department of Human Services. So thank you again for your support and for joining us today and in the future in this critical effort. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce the Pittsburgh Foundation's Vice President of Development and Donor Services, Lindsay Aresti.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to echo Lisa's welcome to our donor and advisor family. We're grateful for your participation and, more importantly, for trusting us as a credible resource to provide education on community issues. I know for me, this is why I come into work every day. I get so much fulfillment in connecting donors to critical community needs. As Lisa mentioned, this webinar is designed to educate you through a deep dive on areas of the housing ecosystem. As donors, this series will help you understand better how you may be able to help. I've gotten a lot of questions from donors around what's happening downtown with homelessness, and here's our opportunity to share our insight and encouraging you to donate, advocate, and/or volunteer to help the issue. This moment is critical for many nonprofit organizations and service providers. Federal funding cuts have made very real impacts on these organizations and individuals that serve our community, creating uncertain futures for their services and those that rely on them. We have heard from many of you asking, how can I help? By donating, advocating, or volunteering, you can make a very real impact. For example, last year, after a webinar, one of our donors made a $50,000 donation, $500,000 donation, to Action Housing based on a real need to fill a gap. Of course, this is such an incredible case of generosity, but still a very specific way you can help. Another example is advocating with us. As a community foundation, we are uniquely positioned to advocate with public officials on particular issues. Last year, our work in Harrisburg and with elected officials raised the cap on a state budget item that funds the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Fund, also known as the FAIR Fund. Funding was raised from $40 million to $100 million by later this decade. Today, we are in another critical situation when it comes to housing. Your engagement through donating, advocating, and volunteering is essential. After this event, in the next couple of days, our team will be in touch with more information about how you can engage. Of course, we will always encourage you to reach out to your donor services officer for more information, or if you feel compelled to be proactive. Now I'm proud to turn over to my colleague, Michael Jonas, to jump into the webinar. Michael?
Can you hear me? Thank you, Lindsay, and it's wonderful to be with you all. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in this series and to be with you all as our donor community and other partners. I'm especially excited to be here to help guide a facilitated discussion to help us learn more about the first phase, what we often think of as our homeless system of services, and those are the programs that are used to help address the needs and support those who are living in our street or in our emergency shelters. I've been privileged to work in this space at the foundation for many years and look forward to learning more about your interests as well. I'm going to start by providing a little bit of background and doing some level setting, and then we'll quickly get into our panel discussion. To get us started, I wanted to introduce and share with you all, you may know this term harm reduction, but it guides, and this approach guides the way that we think of and guide our work and our grant making, our advocacy work and others, which is this approach using harm reduction, which is a set of strategies aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with high-risk behaviors, often associated with homelessness or drug use. And it's a process that it directly and purposefully includes the voice of those with lived experience, their insights, their ideas, and their knowledge and expertise to help guide interventions and to help reduce harm. This approach recognizes that individuals at high risk for a variety of issues are experiencing the realities of poverty, class, social isolation, past trauma in their lives, sex-based discrimination, and other social inequalities that influence people's vulnerability to and capacity for effectively dealing with their harms in their lives. And that behavior change is never linear. It's really, people will go through cycles. As we know, many of our family and friends have challenges. And it's the goal of meeting people where they are as a means to helping them achieve success on their terms. And it involves us, and including you all, to be patient, curious, compassionate, and also develop and competent in expertise. And so there's lots of ways to get involved, as Lindsay and Lisa mentioned, and really interested and eager to think about those strategies with you as well. This means we meet people where they are, and that's why our language today is also very purposeful in terms of saying people experiencing homelessness or unhoused. But thinking about just sharing with you a little bit of background and understanding the conditions that we certainly are kind of currently experiencing today, this is a graph that'll describe for you the information for this year's point-in-time count, which is a process that's done every year, early in the year, that involves people from our Department of Human Services and volunteers that reach out to specifically high-risk street areas where people are living unhoused and or emergency sheltered. And you can see in this process that there's been a steady increase since 2021, as Lisa had mentioned, And you can see the numbers of people here who were living unsheltered in the yellow line or the blue line, and then living, or at that time for the point in time count, in sheltered space in the yellow line of 857. The point in time count is not a perfect measure of the instability that people are experiencing in the street, but it is one tool that we use to get a good understanding of where people are and what their needs might be. And the Department of Human Services and the spectrum of providers that have done great work with them, which Dave represents as well through his work with Bridge to the Mountains, and Andy, his role, which you'll meet in a minute as the Director of Homeless Services, have been able to embed a process. We're always constantly trying to learn and do better in this work to serve people in need, but also build on their strengths. A little bit of demographic. Again, this is just a description of those who in 2024 in the point in time count were either unsheltered in the street or in an emergency shelter and participated in that process. This again describes who they are, but is not who they are. And Andy and Dave will help us understand. But we see the majority of those individuals, 61% were female. Of the racial demographics of the individuals, in this case, 52% were individuals who were Black, 40% were individuals who were white. And of the age groups, 23% fell in the age of 35 to 44, and then 17% in the younger than 18 age group. And obviously, for a system designed to address these needs, there's a variety of spectrum of efforts that are needed across those age ranges that are specific to the needs of both gender and age and race as well, to make sure. And our speakers will provide more insights into what the system, how it operates, and what kind of programs and services are provided at this time. I would also say that if you have questions, please make sure to put them in the chat, as Taryn mentioned in the beginning, so we can get to them at the end. And be curious, right? Let us know if there's something that was surprising to you, or something that you may not have expected, or something that really affirms a belief that you had held to. An example of the harm reduction focus of the Department of Human Services and the providers that participate in the point in time count, they've added an effort to understand what happened to people versus them being homeless as their definition. And so this is a summary of a description of 119 individuals who participated in that questionnaire process that said what happened to them that resulted in this current experience of housing instability or homelessness. 49% of those said it was related to some form of substance use, including alcohol or drugs. 37% of those said it was directly related to an unemployment episode or incident. 30% of those said they couldn't afford the housing. And you can see the list as it moves on up as well. And it's important to note that none of these things happen alone, right? So someone having a mental health issue or need, or experiencing unemployment, or being evicted, these all happen at the same time. So this kind of understanding helps us be more effective in our outreach strategies. To help you understand more about what our homeless system of services does in Allegheny County, which is overseen by the Department of Human Services here in Allegheny County. And there's a homeless advisory board of volunteers that oversees the continuum of care in the region. But these are the core elements that make up the homeless system of services. And you can see coordinated entry and prevention as those first two blocks. Today, we're going to be focusing more on street outreach and emergency shelters, the areas. In the next webinar series, we'll be talking more about bridge housing and rapid rehousing. And then the final one, talking about permanent supportive housing. Again, keeping in mind that this system has to work almost in a cyclic pace, because people very rarely move in a linear fashion, and it takes for a great deal of coordination and amazing support of lots of people dedicated to this work. Just to finally share with you a little bit about the capacity where we certainly have in our region right now, is that in 2024, a little over 8,000 individuals were served in the homeless system of care. Adult and child households made up 15% of that group, and then 85% were both adult and only households. And you can see the age distribution, curiously, that almost the majority of those, by definition in some ways, were young people under the age of 18, and again, that age group of 30 to 35. In 2024, the vast majority of people, almost 50%, were people of color and Black, 36% were white. And then you can see, it's important to note that little purple box of 3% is those that are not defined or no data, 6% at the end. That gives us great confidence in knowing that we understand the data that we're looking at. And looking here again by gender, we see the same distribution, pretty confident in who's in our system and how we're moving forward. The goal of the homeless system of services is to make sure that people's experiences in the system are rare, brief, and ideally not recurring. So this is some information to share with you, some outcome data from the Department of Human Services. While this is an extremely challenging space to recognize some of the efforts that are being made and the successes in terms of the median length of stay, while there's lots of supports and more spaces being provided, there was a 35% increase since 2023, which was 30 days. And that's reflective of many other social and societal factors that are affecting this population. The median length of stay for individuals living in shelter also increased from 21 to 23, but in 2024 decreased by 25%. And the percent of exists in shelter that were not to permanent destination increased from 2024 after an annual decrease from the years before. So lots of movement in our spaces, as Lisa mentioned, reflective of a really volatile system of housing support and housing access. As long as, just as you know, as with the rest of our work here, our departments are interested in providing any additional information about the services and supports that exist in our region and how to best inform your supports for the system as well. And it's my pleasure to transition us now to the panel discussion. I'm going to pause briefly and allow Dave Lettrich to describe his role in the work related to street outreach and maybe do a little brief introduction of himself, because I could go on and want to be sensitive of time. And then after that, Andy Hatfill will also do the same, and then we'll engage in a bit of back and forth discussion. Dave.
Thank you, Michael. There I am. Now I can see myself. My name is Dave Lettrich, and I founded an organization called Bridge to the Mountains back in 2017. And I just recently stepped aside from Bridge to the Mountains at the beginning of this year, and I now have a seat on the board of directors of an organization called the Street Medicine Institute. The history of Bridge to the Mountains dates back to 2015, when, as a seminary student, I met the first person I ever knew who lived in the streets. He and I got to be good friends and spent some time in the mountains at Ohio Powell in particular. And over time, we decided to get a rafting trip together with a larger group of our friends from the street. And we started a GoFundMe, and we called it Bridge to the Mountains, which is the origin of the name. As time moved forward, I was in seminary. I graduated seminary in May of 18. I founded Bridge to the Mountains as a nonprofit in May of 17, and slowly evolved into the largest independent street outreach organization in Allegheny County. We pioneered harm reduction, Narcan naloxone distribution, and overdose reporting through a partnership with the health department, street MOUD programs, and we also pioneered street Hep C programs. That's a general overview. We served Bridge to the Mountains has served somewhere over 1,500 individuals. My last look, we reversed and recorded 1,500 overdose reversals. It's a little bit of the basics about me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. And just for those, just because we always fall into our acronyms, MOUDs are Medicaid opioid use disorder interventions, right? So, that have been used. So thank you, Dave, for your work. Andy?
Hey, everybody. My name is Andy Hatfill, and I work here at the Allegheny County Department of Human Services. My role here is the administrator of homeless services at DHS, and basically that means that I help to provide leadership to the homeless services work that happens at the county. And Michael earlier kind of showed some of those different types of services that range from homeless prevention work to outreach to shelter to permanent housing. And I specifically have responsibility over a lot of our programmatic work, our monitoring compliance and data related work, and then quality improvement. So yeah, kind of involved in a bunch of different things on the homeless services front here. I've been in my current role for about 3 years, but really have been doing homeless services related work since 2009 in different capacities. So just continue to learn new things every day, and really grateful to be here.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. And we're really fortunate to have both of you working in such dedicated spaces and ways, but from different perspectives within the systems. And what I've been most impressed in the foundation and partnering with you all in many different ways is sort of the coordination and care and communication that's put to really put people at the center of the work. If you could start, and Dave, if you wouldn't mind starting first, could you just share a little bit about the progress being made and ongoing challenges you see in addressing the needs of unhoused here and those who are unhoused in Allegheny County? And I like how you both had talked about this is in my work and some of the street outreach we've done together as well, is recognizing these individuals as our neighbors, as our friends who've had an experience in life that has put them in a circumstance where they need help. So really interested in your thoughts. Dave, if you start, and then Andy follow. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. I think that I think it's very important for me to frame Allegheny County and our continuum of care in a national lens. And having had the opportunity to be all over this country, I have not seen an example of coordination, collaboration, and efficiency that is equal to what we have when it relates to homeless services here in Allegheny County. We have always acted and operated from a place of scarcity, not only of finances, but also of individuals. And part of that causes the individuals, regardless of organization, to start to develop bonds and friendships. And we really have a deep-rooted collaboration in street outreach, in human services, in street medicine, where everybody knows each other, regularly meet once a week to discuss everything that's going on in the streets and everybody that's in the streets. And I think that's the efficiency of that system is unmatched anywhere in the country. And I think it's something that few recognize goes on behind the scenes here.
Thanks, Dave. Andy?
Yeah, I'll just kind of add on to that. I appreciate that, Dave. I'll just say, certainly there are, the national trend is that we're seeing increases in homelessness across the country, and we have not been spared of that here locally either. That said, I think the situation in Allegheny County seems solvable, and I think we have made progress, which has been great. I'll just mention a few things. One is that the county does provide a lot of funding each year to a number of different types of programs, whether it be outreach programs or shelter programs or permanent housing programs. And we've been able to increase funding for those programs in recent years to kind of respond to some of the needs that we've seen. However, oftentimes that means that we are prioritizing increased homeless services funding and taking away from other critical services. And so that is always a challenge. And so we have been able to see new programs come online. So Second Avenue Commons is a new shelter a couple of years ago that opened. We have some drop-in services that exist on the south side with Unity Recovery. We've expanded some shelters, and that's really helped to create new spaces for people who might be living unsheltered to be able to access shelter. Also, I've been able to improve some of the ways in which we are prioritizing people that are most vulnerable for our permanent housing programs, oftentimes people who are living unsheltered. And then we've been able to kind of further expand a lot of the outreach teams within the COC, specifically within DHS. We have a team of 8 and have been able to work closely with Bridge to the Mountains to support their work as well. So I think we have a really strong, and I'm just mentioning a couple of the groups, but there's many other groups that do street outreach and street medicine locally that are work really closely together and provide really critical services. So that's been really great. I think some challenges that I would see that still seem to exist are related to just sort of ongoing need for shelter and the need to just increase the rate at which people are able to sort of flow through the different steps of the homeless system, as Michael mentioned earlier. We see that being still a challenge that we experience here. And And again, I think it's the homeless system in general is just a sort of large and complex system. Many different parts to it, as was mentioned, many different people involved in that work. And I think it oftentimes, as any system does not always work as efficiently and properly as it could. So some of the work that's happening, Michael, Dave, myself are involved in some strategic planning work that's happening that will help hopefully to make those things more aligned. So yeah, those are some of the challenges and strengths I'm seeing, Dave. Mike.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. And I would say that it's been really encouraging from our work at the Pittsburgh Foundation of participating on the Homeless Advisory Board and learning more about the system of care, and from the grant making and also advocacy work we do in this space, is to be able to build on the like type of relationships and communication you all share, which is really fantastic. But although if you were to look at the news, you would see that we have ongoing constant challenges in this space, right? And the thing I've been encouraged by is the opportunities to be curious and learn and work together in those spaces. And something I've been encouraged even recently with some of the news around the challenges associated with the point in time count is the Department of Human Services and the provider's willingness to lean into a space of nothing is perfect here. We need to constantly keep learning and working. And that's where I think even for the foundation and our partners with our donors, thinking about strategies for how to best support that moving forward. I provided some demographic information earlier about the characteristics of those who are experiencing homelessness, but really interested in knowing from the expertise you both bring, could you help us understand on a more intimate or personal level, human level, who are those experiencing homelessness that come to mind? That's a difficult question to answer, but I know that my life has been changed by working with people who have been amazing mentors and teachers of mine who are in that state. So just thought we'd start maybe, Andy, with you from your perspective and work, and then Dave, if you could follow, that would be really helpful.
Yep. Yeah, so I'll start, and I think Dave certainly has a lot more kind of one-on-one engagement with folks. But yeah, I mean, certainly we see that like homelessness and housing insecurity does not discriminate. And so we see plenty of people who are in families with children and single individuals, young people, older adults. All of these groups are experiencing homelessness in some way. And a more recent trend has been seeing more and more older adults who are experiencing homelessness, and folks who are quite older. And so that's been a challenging recent trend. We at DHS oftentimes, as we're working with providers and our staff to like help support people who are navigating the homeless system, oftentimes see some of the challenging situations are people who have been experiencing homelessness for a long time, and those cases are always a little bit more tricky. But one thing that I've learned is that there are a lot of people that just enter the homeless system and use those services for a short time, and it's really important that we have the resources to be able to help them. And their experience of homelessness may be very brief. It may be just a couple of days, but that has been more of a trend, I think, recently, that we're seeing more and more people who have these brief episodes of homelessness. We see a lot of families with children who are experiencing homelessness. We have a good system here in the county to support those families with accessing shelter, so that families with children are not living unsheltered. Unfortunately, the same system doesn't quite exist for all singles, and so that is very true. Yeah, I think I'll turn it over there to Dave.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I have to say that coming from somebody who had no idea what homelessness was or where it came from 10 years ago to where I am now, I think the greatest thing that I'm struck by is the misconceptions that were out there as far as who are the individuals who are experiencing homelessness. I believe strongly prior to the past 10 years that it was a direct result of substance use and mental health. And while I think that substance use and mental health challenges exist within the streets, the greatest thing that I've learned is homelessness does not discriminate. I've seen people from all walks of life, with all different histories. The only consistent thread that I see is an experience of trauma, substantial trauma, and that then becomes compounded when hopelessness occurs when somebody moves into a place of even sheltered homelessness. It's a very, very, very devastating life experience for somebody to have the first time. It often becomes an accelerant of substance use. It often becomes an accelerant of mental health issues. I think we've all learned enough about mental health to understand that there are environmental factors that impact our mental health, and the environmental factors associated with homelessness cause serious mental health issues associated with PTSD, associated with severe depression, anxiety. Those are all there, and it's often substances that are used not in a way to that end up keeping people in the street, but oftentimes self-medication is the only thing that gives somebody the ability to continue in life. And the some of the most amazing, magnificent, wonderful people I've met in my life have been in the street, and it's been a very profound experience for me over the years. So I really think that that's so hard to communicate outside of the intimate circles of the street in a way that people can truly understand. But that has been my experience.
Yeah. And I know that from working with you both and from the learning we've done is, the incredible importance of the social safety net and the services being provided. And currently in this day and age, the threat to that safety net in many ways because of um, you know, um, political structure shifting and trying to figure of next steps. And so thinking about how important those relationships that you all have as well, something I've learned as well is that the importance of those relationships is important, but that means that those associated with and working closely to the system are also experiencing a great deal of trauma on their own. The providers being accessible, those in the system that are doing great care. And so thinking collectively that we're able to address those traumas as humans with our safety nets that we have around. And if you don't have those safety nets, then it pushes more extreme experience too. And so just really honored by the incredible work that is going on in this space throughout the region and the creative work that continues to happen. Is there anything that comes to mind that either of you would share that was a great surprise or learning of your own from the work you've done in this space, or that was a relationship or something that occurred that just has lasted with you so far?
There have been so many deep, meaningful relationships that I've had. When it comes to surprise, I think the the one story that provides an example of how I immediately realized I had everything wrong was when in 2019, MOUD or MAT, medically assisted treatment, as Michael explained, is the providing medication and medical oversight to assist somebody who are using opioids to be able to not use opioids. And we had a real challenge prior to 2019 with somebody from the streets getting access, in particular to a drug called Suboxone, which alleviates the withdrawal symptoms of opioids. And there was a physician at Allegheny Health's Center of Inclusion Health, Jimmy Miller. He and I got together and decided to start a street Suboxone program. And one of the very first individuals that we got involved in the program was a brilliant young man, had a master's degree in early American literature and had been pursuing his PhD, spent time as a high school teacher, and had aspired to teach at the college level, who was struggling immensely with opioids. And he had expressed an interest to us in finding a way to get off of the opioids. And he ended up being our first patient with street Suboxone. And I'll never forget, there is a process called induction. It's you can't just simply take this medication. You have to experience withdrawal to a great extent before you take it. Otherwise, you risk a medical condition called precipitated withdrawals, which is a very, very violent adverse reaction to the Suboxone. And this individual was having challenges in inducing and getting to the point to be able to take it. We moved him into our medical respite, and he was able to successfully induce on the Suboxone. And we were just thrilled. It was our first real patient. It seemed like a great success. And a week later, he called me crying, saying, "I just can't do this." And I said, "Pete, what's wrong?" Pete's not his real name, but he said, "It's today is the 2-year anniversary of when my 17-year-old son blew his head off with a large caliber handgun." And it was at that moment that changed everything for me. And that's when I realized that the opioids that Pete was using had placed him in a situation where he had never actually experienced the emotional side of the death of his son. And it was what his coping mechanism that was allowing him to move forward. And had we been aware of that, and had we took steps to address that trauma prior to removing that substance that was allowing him to move forward, we could have had a much, much different experience in being able to treat him. And that moment changed my perspective moving forward fundamentally.
Just an unbelievably caring, loving, compassionate, traumatic experience to have had, but then also that insight happening, trying to work at scale at that space, and the extra steps and learning and energy really provides incredible input to kind of what that street outreach element and space looks like. Thank you, Dave, for sharing that. We have another question, and then we'll move to the open discussion. But I'm really interested if you could help our participants today understand a little bit more about the role of street outreach providers within the broader homeless system of care services. What does that day in the life look like, and what kind of activities are they engaged with? And thinking about just all the 5 or 6 different programs and the work Catlin Outreach has done at Community Human Services and at Bridge to the Mountains. What does that look like on a daily basis? And help us understand. Oh, sorry. Who's going first on this one? Dave, you're going first on this one. Sorry, my bad.
So, street outreach is the process of building and developing relationships with anybody that is experiencing homelessness in Allegheny County. And so for Bridge to the Mountains, for the City of Pittsburgh's Roots program, for Allegheny County Department of Human Services Field Unit, that looks like individuals going out into the street, usually by themselves, sometimes together with another outreach worker, going to campsites, going to doorways, to alleys, anywhere that we can find somebody that is sleeping unsheltered, starting and building relationships, and then moving forward from there in an effort to try and coordinate services to be able to help that individual achieve whatever they feel is going to make life a little bit easier. And that involves collaboration with street medicine. It involves collaboration with brick and mortar based clinics, shelters, drop-in centers. In Allegheny County, the phenomena that occurred is outreach. We're the only area in the country that has professional standalone outreach that is not directly associated with a particular service. So there is outreach that exists in other areas of the country that are associated with a shelter or with a street medicine program that is sort of intended to go out, find somebody living unsheltered and bring them to this brick and mortar location for services, whereas we provide professional services actually in the streets where people are. We develop relationships that tend to follow people. Bridge to the Mountains, for example, and I know the city's Roots program has a similar phenomenon. Roughly about 50% of the individuals that we're serving at any given time are in the street. The other 50% of individuals that we're serving sometimes are housed in permanent supportive housing and have been for quite some time. But the depth of the relationships that we establish don't have to have a termination point. So they continue on until we get to a place of mutual agreement that our services are no longer needed. So it really ends up being often a primary liaison relationship that occurs and helps individuals in the transition wherever they might be from the time they move from the street into shelter or to bridge housing or to permanent housing or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Andy?
Yeah, I would say that, we've said it a couple of times, but the homeless system generally is fairly complex. I mean, there's a lot of different services that are available. There are a lot of different service providers that are working in the space. You have programs that are scattered in different parts of the county, and I think that it's often difficult for those of us that work in the system to fully understand it. And I think for people who have to access the services, it's considerably more challenging. And though we do our best to try to simplify that, it's still very challenging. So I think that street outreach staff play a really critical role in helping to make that system accessible and make it easier to navigate. Oftentimes it's the street outreach staff who are that sort of first contact with people and are following people and staying with people in relationship to help people navigate the system. Oftentimes helping people to oftentimes are like the first person who are helping people become aware of like challenges like related to bad weather that's coming or safety issues, public safety issues. Working with like when people transition to longer term housing programs and need support and working with a new provider to find housing, it's oftentimes those longer standing relationships that the street outreach staff have with that person that can really make that process go smoother and more quickly. So that's really critical. I think that oftentimes people who are experiencing homelessness and accessing services experience mistrust with different parts of the system. And I think they are oftentimes able to build really good trust with the outreach workers that they're engaging with. And so I think it's really important for, I think having street outreach workers who can build that trust, who can, oftentimes it's the outreach workers who are actually informing the broader system in a lot of ways, like identifying, like health issues and safety issues and programmatic issues that just exist in the system because there's more engagement with people who are using the services. So like raising those issues up. And so, yeah, I think outreach staff play a really critical role in that. Just coordinating care among the various vulnerable people that we're serving. So
Yeah.
I was gonna just share a really brief example myself. So in my role, I don't really do much client facing work at all. But last winter, as an example, we operated a winter shelter that I helped at some, and I was there one morning and just helping to distribute bus passes to people that were exiting in the morning. And there was a woman that I was talking to for a bit, and then like 3 weeks later, I live in East Liberty, and I saw her making her way to the bus stop there. And this had been 3 weeks, and I'd only met her that one time, and she remembered who I was, and we were talking and everything. And it kind of reinforced to me like the value that like our interactions have with people, the way in which every interaction is really valuable. We just had one interaction and we established a bit of a rapport. And so, the ways in which we interact with people and help uplift their dignity and whatnot is really critical. So,
I'm so glad you shared that. And I had an opportunity with you all to volunteer at Second Avenue Commons a few times. And some of my favorite visits at people while passing out food or helping with clothes was just sharing pictures of my dogs, talking to people about, their upbringing and different experiences, and have had the ability to bump into people kind of offline as well in different spaces. But the examples you've shared too, I think also highlight something that I think is really remarkable about the system and space in which you and Dave share, but then also the broader system is something that's really valuable, I've noticed, is the ability to sit with some discomfort, right? As you mentioned, the street outreach workers are often amplifying the voice of those that they serve. And that is often not saying to the system, the Department of Human Services or others or providers, you're doing the best job, keep it up. It means that we need to do more and do better. And so that's really wonderful that we're able to sit in that space and always be in a space of continuous improvement. And that's what a human condition is about, right? And I love the examples that you both shared. An hour is just nowhere near enough to even talk about this level of work. And I want to thank you both so sincerely for the time and preparation and your incredible expertise. I do want to move us to some question and answer, but also let the participants know that if you have additional questions or you have other information, please use the chat if you'd like to put any questions in here for us. But there's also lots of opportunity to continue to learn through the Pittsburgh Foundation. It's my job here as the Vice President for Community Partnerships and Learning and working closely with the Department Development Donor Services and all of our teams to best support and serve. But it's also our job, Dave and Andy, to serve and support you, right? That's our job as a community foundation. So it's a pleasure to be in the space with you together. I know everyone is clapping on their side, even though their screens are off, but if we can move to question and answer, Dave and Andy, does that sound okay? Okay. One question came in is how do changes at the federal level impact local outreach services? If you have any thoughts on
financial, Andy, that's you. Take it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this may be in the weeds a bit, but federal dollars for us primarily means HUD money, which HUD doesn't actually fund like outreach services specifically, although they do really ultimately fund DHS's street outreach work, which is really critical, which that team primarily has responsibility for assessing people for longer term housing programs and whatnot. But obviously, I think any cuts or changes that could happen that could lead to increases in homelessness would certainly cause a lot more stress on the overall system.
And disruption. Yeah, I know that even recently the current projections for reducing the staff size for the Department of Human Housing and Urban Development by up to maybe even half will have incredible impact on that as well.
I think it's going to be very important this year to watch the finances because it is all still very fluid right now. There will, it will also be if Medicaid cuts do occur and if there become challenges in accessing Medicaid, a lot of the services that we have available to individuals are paid through their Medicaid insurance. So there's just a lot of different ways that funding cuts could adversely impact the overall COC and outreach.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot evolving. Curious from some of the discussion, one of the questions has come up are what are the specific tools that outreach workers and groups use to collaborate with one another? And are there needs in those areas for doing more or facilitating more? I know that at least at Second Avenue Commons, there was constant cell phone traffic, right, of people helping. But what are the tools you would describe, and is there more needed in that space?
We the outreach community has been getting together since 2015, back when it was 6 people in a room at Pittsburgh Mercy South 9th Street campus with Operation Safety Net, and has continued. The tools are, we have the Homeless Outreach Coordinating Committee. I co-chaired that for 2 years. It's been around longer than our Homeless Advisory Board in Allegheny County. That meets once a month, but on a weekly basis, everybody with boots on the ground gets together in a room and goes over every single individual that is homeless in Allegheny County. That doesn't occur anywhere else in the country that I've been to many cities and with many street medicine providers in other areas of the country. That is unique to Allegheny County. We have WhatsApp chats that are cross-organizational, that link in. We have different layers. We have separate street medicine WhatsApp chats. We have 4 street medicine programs in this city. That is unique to Allegheny County. Most major cities only have one if they're lucky. So it's WhatsApp chats, it's it's regular meetings. It is phone call after phone call. Everybody knows everybody. The streets, from an outreach perspective, are not territorial. Um, we work as if we are one team, and I think that is what I appreciate most about the outreach collaboration in our city, and honestly, what I miss most about having stepped aside from it all the beginning of January this year.
It sounds like a very Pittsburgh-ish NEBI system, right?
Yeah.
That people in that way, which is kind of a beautiful part of how we work. Andy, do you have thoughts? I have one other question that's interesting that came up too.
No, that's
Okay.
we can move on.
So I was wondering, and this sort of came up as you were talking earlier, there's a question here about are Pittsburgh police and EMS who are involved in treating individuals who are unsheltered, are they trained in providing outreach or calling in outreach staff in circumstances? So just wondering about the interaction between those systems.
Yeah, I mean, I can start that out. Dave should chime in too. But I mean, as Dave mentioned, the city of Pittsburgh does have their own outreach team. It's called Roots, and so they. I can't really speak exactly to what they do in terms of this, but do know that they work really closely with the public safety office to collaborate in a lot of ways with the police and EMS, whether it be training the staff there or just sort of like responding. I believe that the police staff have specific staff who are particularly trained in working with those who are unhoused and sort of connecting there. So I think that's worked really well. There's been some sort of co-response work that's happened between the county and public safety recently to like help that as well, so that we have like the proper people helping to respond to some of those crises downtown, particularly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Andy mentioned co-response and Roots, and Roots is the city's own outreach team. They're broken up by the police zones. There is also co-response. Last I knew, co-response only existed in Zone 1 and Zone 2, so the north side, the downtown area, scratching up into the hill, and there is intent to try and expand it into Zone 3. That has been the most effective collaboration with City of Pittsburgh Police that I have experienced since I've known the streets, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to Sergeant Colleen Bristow, who initiated the first co-response team out of Zone 1 and then was able to move into Zone 2 as well. She's been fantastic. Outside of co-response, it is still very, very challenging. There has always been a tension dynamic between outreach and City of Pittsburgh Police that comes in waves. But it's trending in a very good direction right now.
Okay, that's really helpful. I have a question here. Is Jim Withers still involved?
He is. He's texting me as I'm talking. Jim Withers is still involved. He is still medical director of Pittsburgh Mercy's Operation Safety Net, and he is still heavily involved in the Street Medicine Institute, which he founded. Which we now have, I think, 1,300 street medicine programs all over the world, 900 in the U.S. And the term street medicine was determined at the Sheraton Station Square in 2009 with the first international symposium. That's a real feather in the cap for Pittsburgh. Outside of Pittsburgh, the rest of the world really does recognize us because of that. But he is still active. He says 2 more years. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the true definition of a calling. I want to leave just a couple of spaces. But Dave, do you want to give a big plug for the film Beyond the Bridge at the end of the month?
Yeah,
Just to share it. We'll be
please.
sharing that too. Do you want to share
Please.
something?
In fact, if you want to see Jim, he's going to be involved. He'll be partaking in the panel discussion that follows a film that is coming to the August Wilson Center It's a free viewing on April 30th, Wednesday, April 30th at 7 p.m. at the August Wilson Center. It's a movie called Beyond the Bridge, A Solution to Homelessness. And the some of you may have had the opportunity to see a movie called Under the Bridge, The Criminalization of Homelessness, that came out, I think, in 15 or 16. A story about a camp in Indianapolis that was shut down. The same team that created that film moved forward from that experience and decided they wanted to create a film that explores what can be done to resolve homelessness. And I've had the opportunity to pre-screen the film. I think it's fantastic. It's extremely well done, and it is free. There is an online link to an event, right? You do need to reserve space. I think we can only seat 500 at the August Wilson Center. But if you really want to get a feel for what is happening around the country and what the leading ideas are, I think it's a very important film to see.
Dave, thank you for that. And that's a perfect transition. And for those who are participating on the webinar, we'll make sure to have that information available for your donor services officer to make sure to attend if you would like more information. In addition, we've pulled together a fact sheet of information about the housing strategy work that we're doing here at the Pittsburgh Foundation. And Dave, Andy, and I, and others from the field have worked to pull together just some more organizational information for you all who are on the call about organizations that are specifically involved in the street outreach space. And those will all be available with your donor services officers. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them sooner than later, even better. Share how this webinar was in meeting some of your curiosity and knowledge and expectations. Please join me in thanking Andy Hatfill and Dave Lettrich for your amazing work. I'm deeply appreciative of your amazing friendships. And thank you for partnering with us at the Pittsburgh Foundation for making us better and helping us understand ways that we can best address the issues of unstable housing in our region. So we are constantly in a learning space with you. Something I've appreciated is your mutual ability and others in your systems to pick up the phone and call us, right? And that's the kind of non-transactional and relationship we want to have and care about you both very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to the foundation. I so much appreciate having this conversation and the fact that you are seeking to have these conversations. It is ever so important right now where we are as a local community and as a country to be having these types of conversations. So thank you so much.
You both rock. Thanks.